There is a story hidden in the Old Testament, a story of unthinkable sorrow and unwavering courage. It is the story of a mother, a woman who faced an unthinkable level of grief. Imagine this, a woman all alone, crying morning and night over the dead body of her children. Day after day, night after night, she remained. 7 young lives lost, hanged and abandoned, yet she stood beside them unyielding. Why? What force could compel a mother to linger in the shadow of death, risking scorn, danger, and despair? The Bible shows us that a mother's grief is not powerless. It can pierce the hardest hearts, sway the proudest rulers, and shine a light into the darkest corners of the world. This is the story of Rizpah, one of Scripture's most overlooked women, whose love for her children defied death itself. She became their guardian long after their lives had ended, a testament to devotion that goes beyond understanding. Prepare yourself, because this story reaches deeper than history or Scripture. It speaks directly to the soul. And if you stay until the end, you'll discover a detail so subtle, so profound, that it unveils the tender heart of God in a way few have ever noticed. This is a story that will stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Picture this. The wind howled over the hills of Gibeah, chilling the bones. Among the ruins of King Saul's palace, a lone figure stood. A woman. Her face was weathered, marked by suffering, but her eyes burned with quiet determination, staring at something no one else dared. Her name was Rizpah. It means hot stone or ember. Like an ember, she burned quietly, refusing to go out even when the world around her was dark. But who was she, and why was she here, alone, in a place of death? Rizpah's story is one of the most overlooked yet moving tales in the Bible. She was not a queen, not a prophetess. She had no armies, no wealth. She was simply a mother. And her love for her children would leave a mark on history that echoes even now, thousands of years later. At that moment, Rizpah faced every mother's worst nightmare. Her sons were dead. Not just dead, they were dishonored, displayed publicly as if their lives meant nothing. Hung on poles, left for scavengers, for birds of prey, for wild animals. Their bodies were abandoned. And yet, she made a choice. She would not let them be devoured. She would not let them be forgotten. To understand her pain, we need to go back. Rizpah was a concubine of King Saul, Israel's first king. She bore 2 sons, Armoni and Mephibosheth, and raised them in the palace, surrounded by power but overshadowed by a king who had fallen out of God's favor. She lived a life of privileges, but it was also a life of shadows, where loyalty and survival were a delicate balance. When Saul died in battle against the Philistines on Mount Gilboa, everything changed. David rose as king, and Rizpah's world crumbled. From a royal concubine, she became a widow, vulnerable, powerless. Imagine walking through once celebratory halls, now silent and haunted by memories. Imagine holding the hands of children who look to you for protection, knowing the walls that once promised safety now conceal danger. Rizpah tried to shield her sons, but danger was already at the doorstep. Then came the famine. 3 years without rain, crops failed, animals starved, and the people cried out. David asked God why. The answer was shocking. The famine was punishment for Saul's broken covenant with the Gibeonites. David called for the Gibeonites and asked, "What can I do to make amends so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance?" See 2 Samuel 21-3. The Gibeonites made their demand clear. They required retribution, blood for blood. 7 of Saul's descendants were to be handed over to be executed publicly. Among them were Rizpah's sons. David consented, not out of malice, but because he understood that the covenant with the Gibeonites had been established in God's name, and promises made before the Lord could not be disregarded without serious consequences. The day of execution came. Rizpah's heart shattered. Her children would die, and their bodies would be left exposed, a warning and a disgrace. But Rizpah refused to leave. She laid a rough sackcloth on the jagged rocks beside them and kept watch. Picture it. A mother under the scorching sun, surrounded by the smell of death, birds circling overhead. By day, she waved a staff to scare off scavengers. By night, she lit fires to keep wild animals away. She no longer wept, her tears had long dried, but her love, like a small ember, refused to die. Each day brought new trials. The wind ripped at her hair and clothes. Rain pelted down, soaking her through. Hunger gnawed at her belly. Exhaustion weighed her down. Yet she remained, perched on the jagged rocks, ever vigilant. When the soldiers left and the city returned to its rhythms, she stayed. Alone, watching, guarding the honor of her children, no matter the cost. Her vigil stretched on. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Some scholars estimate she guarded the bodies for 5 or 6 months. And yet, not once did she cry out for justice. She asked for no help. She simply stayed. Her message was clear. You may take their lives, but you will not take their dignity. You may forget, but I will not forget. In the silence of the desolate hills, she spoke to no one but her children. She whispered prayers, whispered stories, whispered hope into the ears of those who could no longer hear. And still, she endured. Her strength seemed impossible for a mortal to sustain, yet her love carried her through. Rizpah's devotion was both heartbreaking and inspiring. It mirrored something far greater, a love that never wavers, a courage that refuses to bow. It reflected God's own steadfast care for his people, enduring even in the face of despair, injustice, and death. She didn't know it, but her silent act of love was about to touch the heart of a king. At night, under the vast canopy of stars over Gibeah, Rizpah would lift her eyes to heaven. Alone with her memories and her grief, she likely prayed not in elaborate, formalized words, but in the quiet language of the heart, the kind of prayer that needs no voice to be heard. The stillness around her, the soft rustling of the wind, and the faint cries of nocturnal creatures may have been the only witnesses to her sorrow. Yet, in that profound solitude, her devotion spoke louder than any words could. Rizpah did not ask for revenge. She did not question God's justice. She understood that the deaths of her children were tied to something far greater, a broken covenant, a sin that demanded atonement. She did not fight against God, nor did she abandon her children. Her act was both human and spiritual, accepting divine judgment while insisting on preserving the dignity of those she loved. She stayed, night after night, with no comfort other than the presence of her own steadfast heart. In doing so, she embodied a quiet courage that few could comprehend, the courage to honor life even after death, the courage to stand for love when it seemed powerless. In Rizpah, we see a profound lesson. Mourning and faith are not opposites. It is possible to grieve deeply and still trust God. It is possible to suffer and yet remain faithful. How many times in life are we tempted to give up when pain seems endless? How often do we cry out only to feel that heaven is silent? Rizpah was in that very place, yet she chose to stay. She chose to honor. She chose to love, even when love seemed powerless. Her vigil was not passive, it was active devotion, a declaration that she would not allow injustice or sorrow to erase the memory of her children. Her vigil was more than guarding bodies. It was preserving memory, declaring to the world that these men were loved, that they were more than just names on a list of divine justice. They were sons. They were human. And God was watching. Every day, Rizpah faced the scorching sun, the chilling winds, the threat of wild animals, and yet she remained. Each hour she spent watching, praying and mourning was a testament to the strength of a mother's love and to the unshakable power of faith. She showed that human grief, when paired with devotion, has the ability to transcend the limits of ordinary life and touch the eternal. Word of her devotion eventually reached King David. Someone told him about Rizpah, the mother who, month after month, stood beside the bodies of Saul's sons, protecting them from birds and wild animals, her grief silent yet fierce. And it was told David what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, Saul's concubine, had done. 2 Samuel 21:11. The king, a man of poetry, wisdom, and of God's own heart, recognized something sacred in her act. It was not just the protection of the dead, it was the preservation of honor, dignity, and love in the face of death itself. David understood that such devotion was not ordinary, it was holy. David acted. He commanded that the bones of Saul and Jonathan, which had been secretly collected by the men of Jabesh-Gilead, be brought together. Alongside them, the bodies of the 7 hanged men were collected and given a proper burial in the family tomb of Saul's father, Kish, in Benjamin, 2 Samuel 21:14. In doing so, David honored the lives that Rizpah had honored, acknowledging that human compassion can guide the actions of even the most powerful. Then, something extraordinary happened. The rains returned. The famine ended. Life and fertility came back to the land. Rizpah, a mother without armies, wealth, or influence, had moved a king's heart, and through him, God acted. Justice and mercy intertwined, all because one mother refused to abandon love. Her story demonstrates a profound spiritual truth, that the steadfast devotion of even one individual can influence the course of a nation and bring restoration where despair had once ruled. Rizpah's story could have been lost to time. She wrote no psalms, prophesied nothing, and yet her love was immortalized in Scripture. She became one of the strongest women in the Bible, not through physical strength, but through the strength of heart. She reminds us that God notices small gestures, silent tears, and love that endures even when no one else sees. In a world that often celebrates visible power and grand gestures, Rizpah stands as a testament to the quiet, unshakable force of steadfast love. True love never gives up. Even in the face of death, even when human hope seems gone, it remains steadfast. Rizpah represents all who suffer quietly, who pray without applause, who remain faithful when the world has moved on. Like Mary at the foot of the cross, like countless forgotten women in the Bible, her love was unflinching, her courage unmatched. Through her vigil, she revealed that grief and faith can coexist. Pain, when met with unwavering devotion, can become testimony. Suffering, surrendered to God, is never in vain. Her significance transcends her personal story. She embodies all those who love unseen, who remain faithful when no one is watching, who trust God even in the darkest times. Rizpah's vigil ended. The bodies were buried, the rains returned, and she could finally rest. But her story echoes across generations and across cultures, a reminder that love is the most powerful force there is. She teaches us that mourning can have purpose, that grief, guided by faith, can create lasting testimony, and that love honors even in death. Today, if you are experiencing pain or loss, remember Rizpah. Remember that God sees every tear. He honors faithfulness, even in silence. Even in the least read pages of the Bible, there are stories like hers that can transform your life. Rizpah, the mother who guarded her children's bodies, shows us that love is stronger than death, that faith can endure despair, and that God honors those who honor him. Her story challenges us. How often do we give up too soon? How often does weariness overcome us? Rizpah stayed. Months she stayed, protecting, praying, watching, and loving, even when it seemed it made no difference. Rizpah's story reminds us of the extraordinary resilience of a mother's love. It shows how faith and perseverance can shine even in the darkest of times. Her courage and devotion echo across the centuries, a quiet testament to what it means to love without limit. Even now, when you think of sacrifice, endurance, and unwavering love, think of Rizpah, the woman who stood alone, fearless, guarding her children, the woman who proved that love can be stronger than death itself. The lesson is clear. Never give up on love. Never give up on honoring. Never give up on remaining faithful. When life seems hopeless, stand firm. Love even when unseen. Honor even when powerless. Trust even when the world seems silent. Faithfulness that endures reaches the heart of God. Rizpah's story calls each of us to a higher standard, not a standard of power or influence, but a standard of steadfastness, humility, and devotion. If Rizpah's story has touched your heart, reflect on it. Which part inspired you most? Have you ever needed to remain faithful when all seemed lost? Across Scripture, across generations, thousands of stories of faith, courage, and perseverance await, waiting to teach, comfort, and inspire. Rizpah, the mother who wept over her children, reminds us that God's love and a mother's love never fail. Even in forgotten pages of Scripture, there are treasures of faith that can transform your life. May you, like Rizpah, remain steadfast. May you love to the end. May you trust that God sees, God honors, and God acts. God bless you. And until the next story,